All right, friends, welcome back to Mind Games, a Sellout Crowd production hosted by me, Guerin Emig, Sellout Crowd columnist, occasional podcaster, friend of everybody, including the dogs. Love the dogs most of all. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for reading my content. I know that you have a choice when it comes to how you devour your sports media. I do not take it for granted that you choose me or my colleagues at Sellout Crowd. We all love your patronage. We all love your attention. We will continue to crank it out. We've been busy all week talking about Bedlam, writing about Bedlam. We're still going to be talking and writing about Bedlam after the show, but for the sake of this episode of Mind Games, let's welcome back in the fabulous Hutchens twins, our ace beat writers covering the Cowboys, Ben and Sam Hutchens, who haven't been on the shows since it was sort of a dress rehearsal, fellas, right? We were just kind of seeing if all the equipment worked the last time you were in the studio with me, and we learned a little bit about you. We learned a little bit about your relationship. How's it going? For lack of a better way to start, how are you guys doing?
Well, I know I'm fantastic, Guerin. And I know we'll get into the personal side of things, but when we were last on, if you would have asked me, hey, yeah, the Cowboys would be 6-2 at this point in the season, I'd say, oh, that's probably a pretty decent chance of being right. But it was a crazy route to 6-2.
No
But I'm
kidding.
certainly glad to be back.
Yeah. Any
Ben and
complaints,
I
Sam?
are, yeah, we're moving. We live together now. We live at the Lynx apartment complex, which, if you know Ben and I, kind of, in the real world, we enjoy the golfing. So, Garen, we get a lot of golf balls in our backyard. We bought a vase from Goodwill, that we wanted to collect the golf balls that are in our backyard, and it's all the way filled up now, all the way to the top. So, not to say that Ben and I never lose golf balls. It just helps keep the cost down of golfing.
So the kids in your neighborhood are selling lemonade in the front yard. You guys are going to put up a used golf ball stand. Is that how you're going to pay for your greens fees there at the links? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we could. It feels like an Easter egg hunt every day, where you go, go out the back door, and you're hoping you turn over a Titleist and not a Pinnacle. But we have plenty of options of both. Hmm.
I love it. Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to ask you about, because that's one of the things we referenced on the last your last appearance on Mind Games was the relationship, how unique it is, and it still is, and the roommates that still very much. I take it you're still together, you're still living together, so nothing crazy has gone wrong. We'll talk about everything that's gone right eventually, but since this is Bedlam week, since this is the last Bedlam, I suppose we ought to talk about what's happening at Boone Pickens Stadium at 2:30 on Saturday afternoon. And before, you've broken it down to two of you every which way, but inside out, I think. And you've already probably gotten around to that since we're at midweek. We'll get into a little bit of game planning and ideas about how it's going to actually turn out. But let's make this interesting and ask first of all, you guys are how old again? You've told me once already, but how old?
We're 21. We'll be 22 next month.
Shouldn't have even asked. I should. So, I mean, your Bedlam knowledge is a little bit different, right? I mean, your firsthand knowledge is a little bit different than the majority of the state. This thing does go back over 100 years.
Yeah.
And so I don't get the 21-year-old perspective on the rivalry, on the series. I'll open it up to both of you for just personal feelings about it, where it became real to you, how it's changed, if it has changed, and how you think you're going to feel when it's gone.
Yeah. Ben, let me know if I'm on base here. Feel free to cut in, but I think I can speak for both of us pretty well. We grew up huge sports fans, watched all sports in the DFW area. That's where we grew up and have a lot of our sports loyalties. So when we moved to Guthrie, Oklahoma, which happened to be the site of the first Bedlam, Ben and
Yeah.
I, and that was in 2012 we moved. So we moved and have grown up here now, but we found out pretty quickly that the question you get asked second beyond, hey, what's your name? You're new around here is, well, are you an OU guy or an OSU guy? And
Right.
Ben and I, growing up in the state, we really couldn't have cared less for the longest time. And now we kind of started writing for the Ocali early on. So we haven't really ever lived a true fan's perspective of Bedlam in Oklahoma. But Ben and I were talking before the show a little bit. We think that just because of it's the life we've lived, if you are a sports fan that's new to the state, you kind of end up gravitating more to OU unless something pulls you in the other direction. Ben,
Right.
is that the feeling you got too?
Yeah, I think just with living in Guthrie, maybe we were a little bit closer to Oklahoma City and in that area, and we would just watch whatever game's on, and of course OU in that area, 2012, 2013, gosh, they were on a whole lot. Maybe it was just after OSU had kind of come back down to earth a little bit, so I think maybe we were kind of lukewarm. We would just root for good games for the state. That's the first thing people associated with the state of Oklahoma was kind of football. So it was definitely a kind of just general dipping our toes in the waters of Bedlam.
Hmm. You mentioned that you caught the journalist bug pretty quick, right? When you were at OSU, writing for the Ocali, where they say, when that guy says no cheering in the press box every week, he means it. that's not
That's right.
that's not always easy for the student journalist. I mean, I get it because I was once one myself and had a pretty, earnest rooting interest for the school that I was attending. There was not any undergrad time before you went all neutral party on Bedlam and on OSU, where you showed up at a fraternity house and they had the car out front and you could take 5 swings with a club, right, for $1. And it was paying, it might have had Riley's face, or Bob, maybe this goes back to Bob Stoops, Riley's face on it, or Baker Mayfield's. None of that happened with you guys at
Sure.
all?
I think our first year, Ben and I kind of got involved writing and covering and learning about, maybe the things that you don't necessarily assume, like, hey, neutrality and all that. We really started, I'd say, sophomore year on. So there was probably a year as a freshman where we kind of got to experience everything as
Okay.
fans.
Okay.
The Ocali had some great mentors, and a lot of it wasn't even, our advisor, John Helsley, telling us, hey, this is the way. It was the upperclassmen that really helped explain, hey, if you want people to trust you as a voice for Oklahoma State, you can't be all rah rah OSU because you're expected to write about the story
Yeah.
when a player gets in legal trouble or a player misses 3 field goals, stuff like that. So we had some good mentors to help us early on.
But that said, Sam, I mean, we had our fair share of time, I think, in that student section in Gallagher, Iba, a lot of times, even in the Boone Pickens Stadium student section a little bit, which was certainly quite the experience. And I think it's important for every person who's around college football so often now to know what it's like in a student section. And I think we definitely
Yes.
had a little bit of time there too.
And
Yeah.
that's
I
where
don't want.
it's real right there. A student section in Bedlam, whew, and I've attended games. I've seen games from it in Norman too, and I've heard those stories both ways. But that, I mean, we'll get into it later. The reason for it being so sad, but I love a little hate in college football,
Okay.
and that's my Rangers are in the World Series right now. But Ben and I, what we've enjoyed is, hey, you bring a little rivalry back to the division. The Astros Rangers went 7 games.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
want a little bit of vitriol. So
Yeah.
it's sad.
I'm glad to hear you weren't just unplugged. That makes me feel really good. Seriously, because everyone, to your point, should be a college student, right? Everyone. My freshman year at Kansas, I camped out at Allen Fieldhouse for the OU game, and I've outgrown that I outgrew that a long time ago. I still get teased. I was teased Saturday when I covered the OU-KU game in Lawrence. Friends on the beat, friends in the industry. They know where they know where I went to school. They know that when I'm not covering Kansas, I might be inclined to sing the alma mater like before a big basketball game. That should never. What I'm saying is that should never leave a person, or you're sort of checking your humanity. Is that the right word? You're checking yourself as a human being at the door, and I don't think you have to go that far.
So Darren, what you're gonna like to hear is when people would ask us, "Hey, are you an OU guy or an OSU guy?" Our answer would be, "We're KU basketball. We're KU basketball guys. We were born in Wichita and have
Yeah.
a lot of family in that
Yeah.
area, and of course it's all Jayhawk centric down there. So our dad is a big basketball guy, college in particular. So we did
Mm-hmm.
enjoy following the Kansas Jayhawks basketball growing up.
Okay.
That was the alma mater I wanted to hear the most, Guerin. When I started traveling around Big 12 country, that was destination number one, was going to Allen Fieldhouse to check out a game. And I'll try and go back there every chance I get to cover games and hear that atmosphere. That's up there with my favorite places to be.
Yeah. Have you either of you thought, not just as Ocali products or alumni, OSU alumni, have either of you thought how you're going to feel walking out of that stadium at 8, 9 p.m. Saturday?
I
It'll be
have.
sad. It'll be sad. Just for the state. I mean,
Yeah.
for me personally, it's the game I circle every year, not because of, you know, anything other than everybody circles it. It's just fantastic. It's a great experience. Gosh, it'll be sad walking out of there.
Guerin, I have so many friends that still go to OSU or graduated right along with me, and I've heard something that I think is a little naive from some folks, is they say, "Oh, I'm so ready for Bedlam to be gone, so ready for it." And granted, a lot of that is the history. The Cowboys generally take a loss in that game, but I think it's one of those things. Be careful what you wish for, because it is really usually the culmination of the season in terms of, you know, dates on a calendar. It's usually last, but it is truly the culmination of the season in terms of it gives everyone in the state a chance to root for, a chance to rally for. I almost think it'll be one of those deals where as soon as it's gone, you wish you could have it back. And I hope a lot of fans who maybe feel, at least on the OSU side, that they want Bedlam gone, good riddance, send those Sooners to the SEC. I hope a lot of those fans can at least take a step back and realize there is a piece of this that's special, because it's not going to come back. And what people don't understand is when it does come back, it just won't be the same.
Yeah.
And so the every year of it is really special. And I always circle back to when I would move to the middle of the state. People ask me as an 11-year-old, "Hey, what color do you wear? Orange or red?" And friendships were kind of determined by that a little bit as an 11-year-old, which is a little sad, but it's a very special thing about this state that once it goes away, you know, be careful what you wish for, because it won't come back in its same form ever.
It is a great point, and it's a relatable one. Again, to tie it to my experience, fellas, as a Kansas graduate, when Missouri went to the SEC a little over 10 years ago, people in Lawrence up and down the line were just pissed off, right? And screw them. They're the ones doing this. We don't need to play them. We don't want to play them. We don't want to see them. We barely wanted to see them when they were our arch rival for a lot of reasons that had nothing to do with sports. But if they're going to do this, bleep them, right? And then about 3 or 4 years later, you start thinking, we still have K-State, right? But it just isn't the same. It just is not the same level of animus. And as much as we being, I'm speaking as an alum now, as much as we sort of live to crap talk and just disdain and hate everything associated with Missouri, and especially Tiger sports, we miss that. And it was like, can we please have this back? And that's what you're sort of, and I'm thinking about OSU that doesn't have a K-State, right, to fall back on. And I'm like, what are you going to do? Are you going to manufacture something without OU? Who's that going to be? Do you have any ideas who that might be? So I completely track with what you're saying.
Yeah, I was curious. The Big 12 schedule for the future just came out. Ben and I just got a story up on that. And the Cowboys were not given a designated rivalry. So, you know, people kind of floated out, hey, maybe Colorado would be it. Maybe Texas Tech would be it. People were desperate for Oklahoma State to get a rival. And it's like, okay, maybe one happens naturally. To me, that feels a little hard to do. But at least it will not happen. You know, there won't be a man-made, there won't be a your mark-made rivalry with no designation. So yeah, it's sad. Guerin, remember the Thomas Robinson KU Mizzou game?
Right.
And
The last one.
Yeah, I watched as I forget how long that those two schools broke up, but and maybe breakup's a good word, by the way. It does feel like a bad breakup a little bit.
It's a really bad breakup.
But I still remember that game to this day, and it's just such a special memory whenever you can have two schools that are huge rivals. Maybe deep down they have a little respect for each other. I'm not saying it's deep down, but it's sad that we'll never get to find out.
Yeah. Well, Chad Weiberg will tell you he has respect for Joe Castiglione, and I believe he does. I'm not, you know, he's a pure guy. right? And so I don't think it's personal between them, but it is very professional between them, much as it's professional between Casey Schrum and Joe Harris, because of the disadvantage that Oklahoma State was put into by what Oklahoma did, which is why I pivot to the fact that for all of the things that are lobbed around about non-conference scheduling being in place and how hard it is with to 10 years out to navigate and to juggle and to all that stuff, they could play this. We learned during COVID that you could get out of games a lot quicker than you lead to believe, right? Remember the 2020 season when
Yeah.
it's just one contract after another was being wiped off the
That's
board
a good point.
because there were games that needed to be played, right? Or games that the possibility existed. So I every time Gundy and Venables and Castiglione and Weiberg go there, it's not like they're not lying. It wouldn't be fun to juggle and to break things that have been put in place, but you could do it. But from an OSU standpoint, I still go back to, I get the emotion because, again, I sort of vicariously lived it through my alma mater when Missouri left Kansas for the SEC. If there's just this, there really is a screw you mentality. No one's going to say that at Stillwater, from Gundy to Schrum to, well, Gundy might at some point. You know what I mean? Weiberg and Schrum aren't going to say it. The Regents aren't going to say it, but I know they're thinking it, or they have thought it. And I still think, true serum, they're still thinking it. That's why, to me, the blame, if you need a scapegoat for everything coming to an end on Saturday, to me, fellas, OU's wearing the black hat here.
That Sam and I talked about it. I mean, look, you can go through all the scenarios and say, oh, OSU could make room. But at the end of the day, this whole thing got started when OU left. Like, I don't see how that's super hard to see. I mean, if OU doesn't leave the Big 12, then Bedlam's still getting played. So to me, that's where the burden lies. Is OU is the one who started it.
Now, what I would draw the distinction. I think it's very reasonable to say OU and Texas, that unity. But in terms of the Big 12, the Bedlam rivalry, OU is entirely at fault. However, I can't blame them, not one bit, because I understand why they did it. And
Right.
I think that if Casey Schrum, Chad Weiberg, and Mike Gundy are given the exact same opportunity, and the only thing that they can't do is tell OU if they have to leave in the middle of the night, I think that OSU does the exact same thing. So maybe that's where it ultimately boils down to, is the fact that, hey, OU, superior football school, and they were the one that got the invite. And both schools are going to think they're in the right. And maybe that's where it ultimately boils down to. All this vitriol is OSU wasn't invited. And it's like the little brother in anything. You don't get to go to the party? That sucks. You can tell all your friends and family, I didn't want to go to it anyway. But you wanted to get the invite at least.
Yeah. Now, it's a good point. It is a great point, because two things can be true. I say this all the time. It's why one of the reasons I call the show Mind Games. I want us to think beyond, surface level. It's absolutely true that OU did the thing that anyone else would. I talked about this with my guest last week, Brett McMurphy from Action. Doesn't mean that OSU had to like it, right? There's a reality and how you react to reality. And I don't blame OSU for being a little bit sour about the reality. We probably ought to talk a little bit about the game itself, because it's fairly important. I don't know if you guys have heard this. There are Big 12 stakes for OU, I guess, sort of maybe outside chance college football playoff stakes, but certainly Big 12 stakes. Mike Gundy's got a lousy Bedlam career record that he might like to correct a little bit more before it ends for a while. There's Oklahoman players on both teams that would like to win this game for state pride, that kind of thing, bragging rights as they call it. Fellas, is there any angle that we're missing? I don't know how else to ask, because I know you've written and talked and thought about this every which way but loose. Is there anything no one's talking about that you're either thinking about or will write about this week that maybe you don't want to let people know?
There is something I thought about, Guerin, and it's that in 2021, when Oklahoma State did the unthinkable, when they, conquered OU and went on to the Fiesta Bowl, Ollie Gordon, Alan Bowman, and Nick Martin weren't a part of that team. Nick Martin was redshirting, Ollie Gordon was in high school, and Alan Bowman was at Michigan. So when you say, if you just take last week's games, you can't tell me that Oklahoma State looks any worse than OU. If you just take last week, And the only other reason to say OU is going to win is based on the history. Well, I don't think the history applies to Ollie Gordon, Alan Bowman, and Nick Martin, three of the most impactful Cowboys this season. So it's like a new blood in this last Bedlam. That's the only thing I can think of. What do you think?
I love Nick Martin. I love, Ben, you referencing Martin, because what you're doing is looking for guys that are slipping through the cracks, because it's an immediate pivot to Gordon when it comes to this game, because why wouldn't it be? Because of what he's doing. If you go from Gordon and you stay on offense, well, then you go to the quarterback, because that's only the most important position on the field. Maybe slide over to Brennan Presley, because the Cowboys are finally figuring out ways to get the old Bixby Spartan touches. And on defense, if nothing else, because A, he's from Edmond Santa Fe, and B, because he ended Bedlam 21 by dropping Caleb Williams, you pivot to Colin Oliver. Nick Martin is an underrated story, I think, behind OSU's turnaround. It does start with offense because of what the adjustments that staff has made and the emergence of Ollie. No question about it. But I love that you landed on Nick Martin.
To this point in the season, Nick Martin is averaging more tackles a game than Malcolm Rodriguez did. That blew my mind.
That blows my mind to hear it. Sam, you got anyone that's slipping through the cracks or anything related to this game Saturday?
Yeah. To me, this game kind of feels like a last defense a little bit for a lot of the Big 12 to spoil an OU Texas rematch in Arlington. Mm-hmm. Which, if you imagine Brett Yormark, that is the worst case scenario ever. Why would you even attend that game if you're Brett Yormark and you can kind of just crown the SEC as the ultimate king when if those are the two teams that end up in Arlington? So to me, I mean, maybe Kansas State has a big game against Texas this week.
Right.
And that's a huge game. So I shouldn't discount that entirely. But at least from OSU's side, it really does feel like this is the Cowboys' last chance and maybe the conference's last stand. It feels like OSU's maybe fighting for the integrity of the conference in the next few years to at least have the and that a Texas OU Big 12 championship rematch would entirely negate. Nothing eats at the superior player or team in anything more than losing the last, especially when the person that you have no business losing to beats you and then says, okay, we're done. Turn off the controller. Throw the game board in the air. I'm leaving. There's always that caveat that, well, what happened last time that could really spoil what would otherwise be a coronation of the SEC, in my mind, if OU and Texas can make it to Arlington.
It's not as if Gundy didn't already have a lot of pressure on him in this game in terms of trying to do something about 3-15, trying to beat the one school that everyone in his fan base wants him to beat, not just every year, but especially this year. To stay in his own race to get to Arlington, just the Cowboys, quest to get back there and maybe play Texas or Iowa State or K-State, whoever. But you're right, there is a Big 12. There is conference weight added to this. And I guess Chris Kleiman feels the same thing for Kansas State when he goes to Austin Saturday, right? There's a responsibility in a way that I imagine Yormark's on the phone with Kleiman and Gundy. What do you think? I mean, I don't know if he's got game plan ideas, but there is absolute weight to that.
Yeah, especially for how reflective that would be of the Big 12 conference these last 3 or 4 years. I mean, OU and Texas haven't been the key players there at the end of the season. It's been this great difference of different teams, and it's been awesome to see Iowa State and Baylor and K-State and TCU and Oklahoma State. So yeah, to get a all SEC Big 12 championship, that would sting a little bit, I think, for a lot of people.
All right, you guys, we mentioned Gundy. Let's finish with exit questions. Let's start with one about Mike Gundy. He's too entertaining to pass up. It's too entertaining not to ask this question. Ben and Sam, your favorite Mike Gundy press conference moment of the year would be, to this point? It's like picking out. I know it's like picking out of a greatest hits, but
yeah,
is there one at the top of your playlist?
I think you have to go the Boz, and that was from last week, so maybe it's more on top of my mind. But it's hilarious to me that Gundy says that thing that, I assume when Mike Gundy, he cracks a lot of jokes. He was cracking jokes about the state of the school system before the mics got turned on. But when Gundy brings up the Boz, and maybe he just feels like he's just telling a few guys that also like football a story. I don't know if in his mind he would have thought that the Boz would come out on Twitter and pretty much say, "Hey, meet me at the 50-yard line," which he did. So I thought that was hilarious. That Gundy told a Boz story, and he says he's not on social media. So, but he always brings up, "Oh, my kids texted to me" or something. So, I just thought that was a hilarious moment about a story that is just football guys talking. But I love how Gundy doesn't seem to censor himself too much.
No, he doesn't.
The one I'll go back to is the before the mics and cameras maybe got turned. I don't know how much of the world saw Gundy kind of wryly remark, "My cameo fee is $85." I got a kick out of that. That was funny.
I thought Cameo was out of business. Is Cameo still a thing, fellas?
Yeah, it is, and I guess Mike Gundy still likes to make a little money from that cameo.
Oh Lord. Favorite story you've told? Well, now how about this? Best discovery of a player personality this year for either one of you.
Oh,
ooh,
like who did you talk to that you hadn't spent much time with and thought, "Oh, that's cool. I finally got a chance to talk to him because he's damn interesting."
Yeah. I'll go ahead, Ben.
I'll throw out Leon Johnson from just last week.
Mm-hmm.
What is a guy from a D3 school in Oregon, George Fox University? What's he even like? And Leon Johnson was just great, super well spoken. You can just tell he's such a smart guy. I found out this week he's a math major. He was at George Fox, and he was going to teach high school math before. Well,
I love it.
He got some NFL dreams, maybe coming to life. So I really liked talking to Leon Johnson III.
What you got, Sam?
Okay, Guerin, this is going to sound crazy. The first person that ever came to mind was, I talked to Danny Stutzman for the first time this year. Obviously, I cover OSU, but at Big 12 Media Days, I had never talked to him at all. So that's actually the first name that jumped to mind. I'll throw him out. Even, I think I asked him one question at Big 12 Media Days, but it was refreshing to talk to him.
Yeah.
And on that side. But I talked to Alex Hale for the first time, who's the kicker for the Cowboys. And he has a pretty wild story about growing up, and football was not even a dream at all until it just became a way to earn a scholarship. But he was a wake skate champion of the world, which I guess I kind of asked, do you watch more Tony Hawk or Shaun White for that? And he said a little bit of both. So I guess that's the best way to describe it. That on the water. But he was a fascinating guy that I look forward to digging more into later this year about, that's the thing about telling a kicker story, Guerin. You never know if it's going to be after they become a hero, or if it's like the Batman quote, they live long enough to become a villain. You never know.
Yeah, that's right.
He has a story that's worth telling.
That's fantastic. All right, your personal story, still living together clearly, now in Stillwater, hanging out at the golf course, catching strays apparently. What else we got? Are we still good with each other's habits, cleaning, cooking, providing, bill paying? Are we no tension? Anything you need to get off your chest while you're with each other and with me and the listeners?
Oh, Guerin, we're in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. Our dorm room last year was the size of a lot of closets. This is like living in a mansion. I feel like I haven't seen Ben. I have to walk all the way across the other side of the apartment to see him.
Yeah, we're still good. I think we're still good.
Good as ever. Sounds to me like that's what I'd say. Ben Hutchens, Sam Hutchens, our dynamic duo on OSU sports, mostly football right now at Sellout Crowd. Catch their show, by the way. If you haven't heard 2 on OSU, you got to. Watch them, listen to them the same way you check out Mind Games every week on the Sellout Crowd Network. Download, subscribe, like, dislike, I don't care as long as you listen or watch. YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple. All of the shows that Sellout are on all of the platforms that you are acquainted with when it comes to your podcast content. Special thanks to Jacqueline Musgrove and Michael Martin for producing. Special thanks to Michael Lane as our creative director. Thank you very much for watching, listening, and reading everything we bring you on the Sellout Crowd Network.